Let's talk about this. Here's what we have this Indiegogo you launched, and here's what I find truly interesting about this. So this is your Exile documentary series exposing the global crisis of religious and ethnic persecution. But the first thing I want to talk to you about is you're trying to shop this documentary series around to these networks, and they're telling you outright, yeah, but can you do it without criticizing China?
So they're telling us two things. Hey, that's good product. And then secondly, can you do it without? And so it's, hey, that's good product. Can you do it without talking about China? And secondarily, the Gulf states. And I'm like, so my exact words the first time I heard this were, we could do a Beatles doc without talking about John, but it would suck.
First, tell us what this is, give us the elevator pitch on what it's about. And then, why China, why they're upset about your criticizing
No
China.
human being should have to live in the place of their birth with fear that stems from their faith, their ethnicity or race, their sexuality or what have you. This is a human fundamental right to live without fear in the place of your birth. Now, if you want to move. I was in Syria speaking to some members of the Christian community from the Khyber River Valley and a representative, and I said, if I could give you anything, which I can't, that you want, what would it be? And he's like, send all the Christians back. And I'm like, hell no. No, never. But I would like to help make a world where they didn't have to fight like hell to leave to begin with, right? Nobody should have to live in fear based on deeply held convictions or immutable character traits.
Yeah.
Pause for dramatic effect. That's it. So why do we live in a world where 80% of the world lives in fear of religious persecution, which we do? 8 out of 10 people, right? That's 4 out of 5 for those of you who went to the same school I did.
And I just want
that's because nobody freaking knows.
I just got to point out, I feel for the white male Christians in this country who are suffering the worst. I'm looking over at Seamus.
He's looking directly at me. Yeah, no. But wait, a white Irish? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I just kind of backed into this, and I'm still friends with some people in D.C., shockingly. And these guys and gals don't know this stuff. Nobody knows this stuff. But if we understood just how bad this is, right? I wish you guys could, in 3.5 minutes, we kind of sort of shine a light on how bad this is, how pervasive it is. And the other thing is, like we talked again off air, hubris is when you say it can't happen here. That's like the last thing anybody says. The Titanic can't sink. It's unsinkable. Oh, shit. Right. This boat's in trouble. And so we want to show these stories because all too often the West, the United States even, and I love this country, right? I've served it in uniform. I've served it locally, state, and federally. And it's not as cool as it sounds. But the United States has all too often been complicit. We've either turned a blind eye or actually helped the people who are hurting their minority populations.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, so I definitely want to get into that, but in detail. But how is it that China plays a role in this, and why is it that? I mean, I imagine you criticize America to a certain degree.
I just did, right?
But so are these networks being like, oh, don't criticize America? No, they're saying don't criticize China.
Right. Well, because in America you can criticize America, but in China you can't criticize China, right?
In America you can't criticize China,
right? Apparently, right? In fact, there's a cottage industry built around keeping Americans from criticizing China. Irony.
Shout out to Mark Cuban.
Everybody, right? And everybody wants. We should boycott the Beijing Olympics. It's like maybe we should, but that ship has sailed. What would be freaking awesome is for one of these amazing young men or women who's worked their whole lives to be so good at this is to earn a gold medal, to use that podium in Beijing to stand up for freedom and human dignity. Right?
Well,
that's not boycott.
They
Jesse Owens sent the biggest possible message to the Nazis when he kept winning gold medals.
But didn't they ban protest outright? So like no Black Lives Matter stuff, no anti-China stuff.
They got to have a medal ceremony, right? Who were the guys in was it 68 who raised their fists, right?
I personally I think they should boycott it. You know what I mean?
I think they should have, but it's too late. We could have replicated this. We're pouring money and fuel onto the propaganda fire that is the CCP that is literally. So I'm doing a Fox News interview, right? You think they're playing to the right, and they go, well, on the screen are the 10 biggest offenders of religious freedom, and I'm like, well, how do you have that list without China on it?
Wow.
I mean, everybody's
the
sold
Uyghur
their
Muslims.
Soul.
Yeah.
Dude, it's the Uyghurs are the tip of the iceberg. So they've been organ harvesting from the Falun Gong in China for decades. There's 2 churches in China. There's the state-sanctioned church that does as they're told, and then there are the people who huddle in. And this is not hyperbolic. Who huddle in fear in their kitchens in groups of 2, 3, 5. Because they want to actually learn the gospel, right? So the Chinese are the absolute worst because why? Because for communism and totalitarianism to succeed, the state must be paramount. And faith, whether it's Judaism or Islam or Christianity, says that there's something bigger than you and me and indeed the state and the government.
That's why Jesus was such a threat to the empire.
Dude, right? And so they had this script for how Jesus was supposed to play, and he didn't play by it.
And it's also why in North Korea they're told that what is it, Kim Il Sung or whatever created the universe or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Right, divine leader.
I read that. I don't actually know, but we did have we had Yeonmi on, right?
Yeonmi Park, yeah.
Did she talk about that? I can't remember the specific details on what they're told to believe.
Remember. Yeah. All I know is that she came out of there not knowing what love was because they had so thoroughly brainwashed her, and there's no chance of developing any kind of faith outside the state in a place like North Korea.
Where are some of the hot
point.
spots around the globe as you've been studying this?
So Nigeria has been horrible for 20 years, and it's never talked about, right? Again, like I served in the military. I did 8 months in a tent in Bosnia during Operation Joint Guard, Joint Endeavor, largely because Cristiano Alampour told us truly, and she was right, how horrible it was when 8,000 Muslims were massacred at Srebrenica, and 500,000 people are murdered in Rwanda over ethnicity before the U.S. and the world get up off their hands. Right, so Africa is terrible. There's like a line of blood across Africa as radical Islam and not Islam. I have wonderful Muslim friends who've helped me not die. Sort of creeps southward. Myanmar, Burma is one of the worst. So in the Second World War, we promised the Burmese minority groups, which is about 45% of the country. You get 55% Burmans, and then you've got Kachin and Wa and Karen, all these ethnic tribes which are either Muslim or Christian. And so the Burmese had never lost a fight. The British came in, subjugated them. The Japanese came in. The Burmese are like, let's get the British out. We're on your team. The minorities, the British and the Americans go to the minorities and go, if you help us get the Japanese out, we'll make sure you have autonomy and self-determination when we win. And they did. They fought, bled, and died next to Americans and British soldiers. And then the war ended, and we said, yes, well, anyway, and left. And the Burmese Civil War started in like 1947, and it's still ongoing, right?
Wow.
Right. And so you hear about the Rohingya, but also there are the Kachin and the Wa and the Karen. And so this has been going on for generations. South Asia's horrific, right? Modi has absolutely weaponized faith because he understands that even though they have 240 million Muslims and millions of Christians and even a Jewish community, et cetera, in India, that they've got 870 million Hindus. So it's a big we-they paradigm. If you're an Ahmadi Muslim in Pakistan, that is Muslims who believe that there have been subsequent prophets after the Prophet Muhammad, you'll be murdered in public and often without recourse. Wow. If you're a Christian in Pakistan, the Christians in Afghanistan now, and we're talking about tiny slivers, right? Again, the formulaic sort of totalitarian game is to pick a minority group big enough that everybody thinks they know somebody from it, but small enough that it can't defend itself.
What are they doing to the Christians in Pakistan?
Driving them underground, right? There was a great story about a pastor, Sahel Latif, who I was able to tangentially help, who was locked up because he was advocating for the rights of the impoverished in Karachi, not just Christians, but Muslims, as land grabbers came in saying, oh, this is the next place that we want to invest, and then systematically, essentially did title fraud on all these people who had like 10 square feet. And so Sahel Latif speaking up for him, and they put him in prison and shut down his church, right? So like it's brave just to be a Christian there, to be a Christian who stands up and leads. So it's arguably stupid. But the backstory was when he got out, immediately they said, well, you need to move. I mean, he shouldn't have to move, right? So that's exile. Is if we tell these stories, right? I'm the naive guy because it's a lot easier to be naive than to be worldly. If we tell these stories, I think that the people of the West won't tolerate it. If the people of the West demand their leaders act differently, then they will act differently. And if they do act differently, we can change the world without putting boots on the ground, without spending money. Do you want to do economic and security business with the U.S.? You do? Good. Then stop throwing your homosexuals off rooftops, dumbass. Right? Stop persecuting your Christians. Stop displacing your Muslims.
When George Bush Jr. invaded Afghanistan, and then all of a sudden we had this Muslim it was a problem with Muslim. It was all of a sudden it felt very racist towards Muslims and Islam. There was a lot of hate. 2003, 4, 5.
What do we have? A Sikh that was shot because an idiot thought he was a Muslim.
Yeah. It's bad.
So how do we, being implicit in that, because sometimes I'm like, take the plank out of your own eye before you try and fix your neighbor. Like, there's definitely some sort of problem here in the United States. Obvious. It's global. It's beyond nation.
Oh yeah,
borders.
no, yeah.
How do we kind of unwind our own racism? Do you see it anyway as part of the same problem? Like we need to unwind
So if we are
racism?
able to do exile at exileseries.com, if we are able to do exile, we'll do an episode here in this country because we do have very real problems with prejudice and discrimination, right? They're not necessarily would have been identified by the groups that claim to speak for the oppressed groups. But this is so simple. And again, I think off air talked about they say it's too simple. I think we've overcomplicated things. you simply say that as a point of entry to do economic or security business with the U.S., you have to pass these civil rights criteria. You may not segregate or disallow the participation of any group based on, sexuality, race, religion, etc. And I think it works because the world has to choose between getting in camp with the West and the U.S. or China. And China they don't borrow, they take, right? It might look like borrowing. So I think it works. The example I always like to use is Turkey during the Cold War. I think I already spoke to this. So we needed to control the Bosphorus, right? Because we needed to keep the Soviets' Black Sea fleet from sneaking down in the Mediterranean and wreaking havoc in Europe. So we said, Turkey, we want you on our team. And they said, cool, we want to be on your team. Meanwhile, they're persecuting their Christian community. They're absolutely decimating their Kurdish community. They passed a law. These are our NATO allies, the Turks, who subsequently, in the last 5 years, actually put under siege a U.S. base and held Americans hostage, and it never made the news, where there were tactical nuclear weapons. But I digress. So they passed a law that said there's no such thing as a Kurd, and the U.S. didn't do a darn thing about it. I'm going to guess that if you say to Turkey, you can go be with the Soviets or you can be with us, but the price of being with us is not oppressing your minorities, that they're still with us. I take that gamble.
There's challenges in how much the United States should be policing other countries. So I think boots on the ground, I would always be opposed to.
Right.
But then there's the question of us knowing what's going on in China with the Uyghur Muslims.
And then doing business with them anyway.
Right. And people like Mark Cuban and LeBron James being like, oh, we got to stop insulting China. And it's like, no. Like, dude, look, we don't want to go invade China or anything like that, but we don't need to be buying stuff made in Xinjiang.
So my head's going to explode, right? Because people go, oh, Muslims. Dude, ISIS killed more Muslims than they did Christians or Yazidis, right? It ain't even close. So, and people go, oh, you're insulting China. You know who suffers the most under the Chinese regime? The freaking Chinese.
Yeah, always.
Right? So don't tell me that by me speaking out against an authoritarian regime that stymies their people as it suits them, I'm anti-Chinese. I'm anti-oppression.
We do have a decent amount of viewers. I have a lot of friends who are very much proud isolationists. They're like, nope, America's for America. We should focus on America. We got to not be involved in that stuff. And I don't agree. I'm not, I think there's a happy medium between like boots on the ground in a foreign country because of their concentration camps like China. And hey, China, we decided not to buy those, cloths from you because you have concentration camps.
This is totally liberty-based foreign policy. It really is. I'm not advocating for boots on the ground anywhere. I'm advocating for not doing business with oppressors. Right? Now, things will happen that we will not know about, and things will happen on varying scales, and certainly hard and fast rules are tough sometimes, but we have absolutely, positively turned a blind eye over decades, and the world knows it. Here's the thing. I'm tired of the partisan back and forth rhetoric, they're wrong and we're right and this and that and the other. We should be able to unite under the idea, right? This is what exileseries.com is all about, that you should be able to live in the place of your birth without fear. Left and right should be able to get behind that. And if the cost of it is that we choose to do business with people who treat their minority groups and their majority with basic human dignity, right? Who can't get behind that? Well, but we don't, because nobody's ever said.
I guess then the solution, or maybe you're suggesting the economic sanctions against countries that...
No, just don't do business with them. Yeah, I guess that's...
But you're talking about, instead of the government, it's more of an individual choice, like you're inspiring individuals.
So when I buy a clock radio, I to this day, and I don't buy clock radios anymore because it's 2022, but I'm old. But so when I buy a product, to this day, I'm going to look on the box and try to ascertain where it's made. And if I can buy a product that's made in Malaysia before I buy a product that's made in China, I'm buying the product made in Malaysia. And if I can buy a product that's made in the United States and I pay a little bit more, to be fair, I'm going to buy that one too. When I was in the military, I used to say I don't want to pay for the bullet that might be used to shoot me, because another little secret of the Chinese is the actual military apparatus owns a lot of the means of production. So you could, if you're in the American military and you're buying products made in China, you, ironically enough, are paying for weapons that will be pointed at you. It starts with the individual.
Or if you're a taxpayer. I mean, just with all the coups that we funded and everything that's gone in the Middle East and how we end up fighting rebel groups that we funded. So it's like, ultimately American troops are just going to inevitably be shot with bullets that they paid for. It's pretty insane.
And without gratuitously piling on to the debacle that was the Afghanistan withdrawal, it is not a question of if, but when Americans are killed with American weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just going to happen if it hasn't already.
It's already
Fast
happening.
and Furious. Obama's whole give cartels guns thing. Man, talk about failed leadership.
They've literally prioritized the political agenda over the lives of their very citizens.
Yeah.
And in the case of what we're trying to address at exileseries.com, they've politicized profit over the lives of their fellow human. Nobody cares about the Uyghurs was refreshing because somebody told the truth. And disheartening. The co-owner of the Golden State Warriors?
People were ragging on that guy because
Yeah.
they were like, how dare he say that? And I'm like, what, be honest with everyone? He didn't say, I personally don't care about their plight. He said, come on, nobody cares about this. Let's be honest.
Which is right.
And I'm like, nobody-
That should be the clarion call. They buried the lead.
Yeah.
We talk about, the Uyghur Muslims concentration camps fairly frequently. And it's remarkable how, for one, a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people do. Literally don't care. And I'm, like I said, look, I know it's not easy for the average person to find that solution, but try to buy American, even if it costs a little more. And there's a happy medium, like I said, between invading the country, declaring war, and just being like, you shot that Disney movie in the province with the security force of concentration camps. We're not going to watch that movie. No, but people don't know or care.
Yeah, well, and if everything I was discussing earlier, the fact that these Hollywood screenwriters and executives at these studios actually hate you and your way of life isn't enough to encourage you to stop purchasing their products, they're also in league and catering to people who are running actual concentration camps.
For real, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's not hyperbolic.
That's not
overstatement.
hyperbolic.
So you asked earlier, what's the elevator pitch? And of course, I would like to wait 20 minutes to answer questions. The elevator pitch is Hollywood won't make this movie, this doc series. They won't. And if you go to exileseries.com, shameless plug, and you click on that trailer and you don't think that's freaking world-class product, right, to tell these stories.
It may be the best, but you did insult China. So I'm sorry we can't fund your project.
It reminds me of like a Vice doc in the early days of Vice when they would just like go to the darkest places.
How much money can we make if we air this? We could make money. How much money can we lose if we air this? We could lose more. What's the right thing to do? Make money. Holy crap, we're screwed, right? That's where we are. And it's just, I mean, like, can you believe it? That's not rhetorical. Can you believe it?
If we're at the point where, and we are, where these big networks are like, let's make a movie, but don't offend China. China's winning. China's won. And then what? I mean, there's some of the worst human rights abusers on the planet.
What was it? Khrushchev, and I'm going to butcher the quote. He said, you will manufacture the rope that we use to hang you.
Yeah.
Right? Again, when money drives you, when money and not justice and that which is right drives you.
It's like the free Hong Kong stuff. When the NBA wouldn't allow you to make a free Hong Kong jersey to order. Or the Hearthstone player, it's a card game, held up free Hong Kong, and they're like, get him out of there. And, look, I do think there's some rational argument in keep politics out of some of these things. But when the NBA can't, like, you're trying to buy a custom jersey for yourself, and you're like, I want free Hong Kong. I'm like, no. Or there was that guy who got kicked out because he had the free Hong Kong sign at the NBA. Like, American corporations, I'll even say this. It's one thing if you are like Mark Cuban actively defending China. It's one thing if you are like, look, we don't want politics in here. And then it's funny when an American corporation is actively defending China from protesters in America. Like, that is just a whole new level
Corporatism.
of what?
It's communism and corporatism.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? Remember, you can use that one, man.
That. That's great.
Corporatism.
Well, so like the left used to rail against the corporations, and now their agenda is funded by and at some level dictated by the corporations, but we won't go down that road. And they used to stand up for free speech, and now you must adhere to the orthodoxy. I mean, like, it's dystopian.
It's remarkable how one of the points brought up by one of our super chatters the other day was that they say black people can't be racist. But Candace Owens is racist.
Exactly.
Like, I'm lost, man. I get it. It makes no sense on purpose, I suppose, but sure, whatever.
When I went into Sudan against everyone's wishes and snatched these two guys out and met them at the airport, I didn't take a camera crew because I'm a crappy politician, right? Because I felt like it would be dirty to do that. But meanwhile, I'm being called a racist. It just baffles me. Like, I'm literally risking my life again and again and again as a white Christian male. For people of different races, ethnicities, and faiths.
I wonder how many people,
and I'm being called a racist.
How many throughout time have been demonized that are actually did good? And like Lucifer, let's take the worst demon of all, how do you know that he was evil? Because history told you he did wrong.
Yes.
People talk
Because
calling you a
said so.
racist.
Yes, he's
I'm
the
like,
devil.
Seamus
Dedicated
is
to
waiting,
Lucifer,
Ian.
the
Come
original
on.
radical.
Maybe you.
I'm steel
I'm not
manning.
down for the Satan
I'm
praising,
steel
by the
manning
way.
the
I'm
argument
just
here,
letting-
but
letting
I
Luke
can't
know, letting
stand the
audience
way
know.
propaganda works against
Well,
individuals. The way they try and tear people.
maybe
down.
I just
you
thought you were
guys-
going to do the Alinsky book for us, and we were just
No, but I think it would be fascinating to see you both do like your own conversation on religion. You know, hippie Ian DMT spirituality with Seamus Christianity, and have that conversation, and it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be about the Christian Bible. I know that the Bible is very divisive about good and evil, so I wonder if, I think of that as propaganda too.
Do you think
but
that's evil?
what
That
propaganda
the Bible's
itself?
too divisive about good and evil?
Oh
Is
yeah,
that an
if the
evil
Catholic
thing?
Church
Okay.
actually devised a plan to manipulate people, that's evil.
Well, no, but you're saying it's too divisive about good and evil. Is it what's wrong with being what's wrong with talking good and evil? Is
because
that
if
evil?
you're the one that gets to decide what's good and what's evil, and you tell people this is evil, then you're controlling people's behavior.
But you're saying what the church is doing is evil.
Seamus,
And you're
You
controlling
guys
my
should have a
behavior.
conversation
Controlling my
later
behavior.
on.
Seamus has told me that I shouldn't consume product from Hollywood, but I've already made a lock stock reference earlier, and I'm about to quote Kaiser Sose. So, right, the greatest trick that the devil ever pulled is convincing us he didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Amen.
So until you can identify some baseline for right and wrong, right? Liberty is ultimately allowing your freedom stops where mine starts, allowing people to make any decision they want to for themselves until it begins to impact others. And so what I'm advocating for is a world wherein we can all do that. But when you start hurting other people, then we have a duty, I think, particularly people lucky enough to be born here, to say, no, I can't support it. We're literally supporting it.
That's the thing. It's not even a question of going over there and doing something. It's just a question of not supporting it
So,
from here.
should we go intervene in Ukraine? Hell no. But we should let the Ukrainians help themselves.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.